Hey folks, Quill18 here, and welcome to another Unity base building game tutorial, part of our Project Porcupine series. And in this episode, and actually probably the next several, we are finally going to be moving this create furniture prototypes function that I said, I even have a comment in here, will be replaced by reading stuff from a text file in the future. Well, that's what we're starting to work on today. And following this, although this might take a couple episodes to finish up, following this, we'll also start to work on moving the furniture actions to a Lua file that can be parsed at runtime as well. So we'll move all this stuff out of code, which is something we've wanted to do forever. So we're going to start up on that because really, a lot of our core functions of our game are now in place. 90% of what has to be implemented to make this game more game-like going forward is going to be working on the furniture data and the functions for that furniture, just adding that kind of content. Although we'll also have to write in some sort of thing for maybe reading in object sprites more flexibly, and obviously we'll also have to work on the user interface. But a surprising amount of work has been done at this point, and we can stuff a lot more content into this game at this time. I mean, I think that's probably pretty obvious when you think about the work that was involved in implementing the oxygen generator and then finally the mining drone station. There was, we had to add for the mining drone station, we had to add a little bit of that logic for where the job spot offset is. But that was a relatively minor feature to actually implement. And there's going to be something like that. We're going to be implementing new furniture in our XML/Lua files, and we'll be like, oh, we need the game engine to support this extra thing because I want to have this furniture have this other sort of quirk that we haven't considered yet. So there's going to be that, but we've done a lot of work, and we should be really happy about that. So that's what we're going to be working on today. Now, one thing I want to do before we start working on our sort of XML reading kind of stuff is over in the furniture code itself, the furniture class itself, we have this object type parameter or property in here. And the comment for it is actually a little bit, doesn't give it full credit for what it does. This object type string says it's queried by the visual system so it knows what kind of sprite to render. But basically it's the ID of an object, so that internally our program knows how to refer to this object in a way that goes beyond just sort of a pointer reference to an instance of a piece of furniture, right? And more importantly, each piece of furniture that is a wall has object type equal wall. So this is useful for the visual system because it's saying, all right, you're saying I got a piece of furniture at coordinate, X and Y here. Yeah, but what image am I supposed to use? Oh, well, the object type is wall, so I'll look to see if I have a sprite called wall, and I do. Okay, I'm going to stick it in here. But it goes beyond that. I mean, in our world, we do have our furniture prototypes dictionary and the job prototypes dictionary as well. And even moving this out to XML and Lua, we're still going to have these dictionaries. And these dictionaries are indexed. Their key is this object type, this ID. Now, I mean, I might change it. I mean, if we're working on a database or something like that, we might have this called just something like ID or different things like that. But I think object type is perfectly fine. However, what I want to do is differentiate between object type and the sort of name/label of the object. Because as we start working on the XML file, I think it's going to make a lot of sense to separate those two. Especially later on when we start to think about localization, right? So that we have our game that can support multiple languages, for example, which is really not a very difficult thing to do, especially as we move more and more of our data to actual data files as opposed to code. It becomes surprisingly easy to support a lot of this localization. So what I'm going to do, just real quick here, is I'm going to get a new property here, public string. It's going to be called name, and I guess... See, I'm being inconsistent about my capitalization. We're going to have to do a pass on that at some point. Typically in C#, you do have properties with capital N unless it's like protected or private or something like that. So I'll go ahead and do that. And for now, I'm going to say it's got a public getter and a protected setter. But actually, we're going to make a bit of a change to this in a moment. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to explicitly define a private string name like that. Which is going to default to null. I think strings are nullable here. They're not the sort of weird primitive that can't be like vectors and whatever. Yep, that's fine. Okay, good. And so in our actual property over here, what I want to do is I want to say our getter over here, just to make sure that everything keeps working the way we are and we're happy, is if name is equal to null, or for the sake of argument, or name, oops, is equal to the empty string. Can we say something like empty? Is that a thing? length. There, length is equal to 0. That might be an easier comparison. Then what we're actually going to return is the object type for the name request. Otherwise, we return this private name. And the protected set, well, obviously, it's just going to be setting name is equal to the value that gets passed in here. There we go. So we will be using name for everything as opposed to setting this protected version or the private version. But now we can go and just add a little bit of extra cover. Now, where do we actually have to change the code to use this name? Well, really not a whole heck of a lot of places. Really what it's going to be is, if I come over here, it's going to be in our UI almost exclusively. Yeah, because it's the furniture build menu. When we're running the game here, our menu over here, it wants to know the name of the objects to include that in the button. And in addition to that, it's when we have in our tooltip over here, furniture wall. So rather than access object type for that, we are going to use the name. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to do something like the ID of our object. I want it to be something like fern, steel, wall. Like you can see, this sort of idea as the ID, as the object type, doing something of this nature. And then we have to make sure it does that and does that. There we go. So we refer to the things internally by the ID, and then we can have the English or French or whatever version of the name. Right now, I guess because it's protected, hell, let's just keep it public for now. That's fine. And if we need to protect it, the name or renaming later on, we can do that. But it means that I can do something like furniture prototype. So fern steel wall dot name is equal to whatever we want, right? Some wall, basic wall, there. Basic wall. We'll put this in just so that we can confirm that our changes are going to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to the furniture build menu over here. So it names the button. It uses furniture prototype. Yeah, so it's looping through the name of the keys and then using the key name, the furniture ID over here is S, which is fine for our building. So object ID equals S, right? Actually, let's... Oh, right, we're having to make a duplicate over here because of the closure stuff. That's okay. But, so we got object ID, but let's get another one that is object name in here, which is actually from the furniture prototypes where the key is S, we can get the name like that. And then we'll say the button is to build this. And this is the, well, this is the name of the object. Actually, I'm going to leave S. We're going to use the object ID. Here, let's move this up here. We'll use the object ID for naming the game object, but we will use the object name in the actual text label on the button. So now we've got that, and the other thing is the tooltip system. So let me go and do that first before we do a test run. So when you mouse over a piece of furniture, we want to get some details from there. And what we're going to do is, again, rather than fill S with the object type ID, we're going to fill S with the name of the object. Now, for most of our furniture, they are identical. But for our wall, it's going to be quite interesting because, so load. Oh, right, that we broke the load because the IDs are different. And pathfinding test probably won't work either because we were trying to use the IDs. So, place furniture, yeah, but where does it get called from? Come on. Set up pathfinding example is in the world. So this would be fine if I was doing it manually, but set up pathfinding example. So instead of building walls, you're building steel wall like that. And so pathfinding test. Oh, right. I forgot about that. Our sprites have to be renamed as well. That's okay. We can fix that. And I'm going to be okay. I'm going to prefer this going forward. What are we looking for? Resources, images, furniture. The wall over here, we go into the sprite editor, and yeah, we have to rename all these to fern _ steel wall. And we have to do this Let me revert here. That was an annoying little way of interfacing with that. I was just trying to undo because I was trying to remember if there was an underscore after it, and there is. We would have wanted to do this anyway because we've talked about before the idea of having different types of walls going forward. You know, walls that aren't just steel, walls that are reinforced, exterior walls, armored walls, all this sort of jazz. So that's what we're working on here. So we've got to go and do this now. And I mean, I didn't have to do this. I could have kept just wall as the default, but this is the sort of naming convention I mostly am going to want. So I'm going to go through it anyway, just to confirm that our little name versus object type differentiation is working properly before we get started on the XML import stuff. Okay, we got that. And there we go. And one more for the middle bit. And then we've got this plus going on, plus all the little end pieces. At some point, I still have to replace these graphics. Some people sent me some pretty cool options for graphics in the past. I'm going to want to do those again. So let's apply this once more. Hit play. Pathfinding test. There we go. And now if we mouse over these walls, oh, it's still using the ID. So this is fine for the construction, but how come that's not working? Yeah, let me try this again. Yeah, make sure to save that just so we have that reference. Is it not using this code? Am I wrong about where this is coming from? No, it's definitely working. Oh! It's because we're not copying it. Right. It's because we need to copy the object's name over. So the prototype was fine, but the instance was not. So let's try this again. Pathfinding test. And there we go. Basic wall. Excellent. That's being copied over. Okay, so now we've correctly differentiated between the furniture's ID and the furniture's name, which is something that we're going to want going forward. Okay, and I think that's all been fixed up now, and everything is hunky-dory and groovy. A couple more little gotchas than expected, but that's good. Okay, so now we're going to be ready to start writing our XML file. So if we open up our world over here and we look at create furniture prototype, basically our XML file is going to be doing the same thing as, well, this part over here, actually including the name over here. And what's nice about this is we won't have to keep like changing the structure of our constructor and things like that if we do need some more parameters, because we just have to update our reading from XML function instead. So, but we're basically, all this information is going to be present in the XML file. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've created a new data folder. Oops, shrink, there we go. A new data folder over here, and I made a dummy XML file. Just furniture.xml over here. It's basically empty. It's we probably want UTF-8, I think, because that's, I think, the default encoding in MonoDevelop. So we'll assume something like that. So this is where we're going to start describing the furniture. Now, do I just want to edit in here? I guess so. I don't find that MonoDevelop is a very strong XML editor. I prefer doing it in Sublime, but let's see what we can do. Now, if we can go ahead and, I suppose, close these others and just have world over here and the furniture over here. And actually, you know what? I will open up in Sublime Text because I want to be able to have both these side by side, which I'm sure we can do with, you know, manipulating the window stuff here. But for the sake of keeping me a little bit saner, what I'm going to do is, yeah, open it over here in Sublime Text. Like that. And then I'm going to grab this bad boy and just shrink it down and probably close the document outliner for now. Excellent. Okay, so I can start making these changes. Can I embiggen the text in here? Oh, maybe this will be a problem. And just zoom. Okay, why would it shrink? There we go. That was weird. Control Shift plus, which is the actual plus, was actually shrinking in here. Interesting choice of hotkeys, but there we go. All right, so we got these side by side. So we are, no, I don't care about unit tests. Go away. Shush. All right, so I think what we're gonna have to do, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a main tag for, this contains furnitures, and then we're gonna have instances of furniture inside. And I think what we're gonna have is one parameter on this, which is gonna be the object type parameter, which we can then use for fern, steel, wall, for example, right? And then mostly we're going to have subtags after that. For example, for something like name, which could be then something like basic wall. Now, one thing, again, to keep in mind is if we're going to do localization, I mean, we're not going to worry about that now, but there's a couple of different ways that we can do that going forward. We could consider having a different version, which is something like lang equals fr, and then, so this is a mur, comme ça, something like that. Anyway, my French is so rusty these days. So you could do something like that. Alternatively, I guess what you could have is inside of this, you could do something like en name, and then fr, etc. Or, and this is quite a bit more common, is you almost don't have the name code in this file. Instead, you would just have this plus the actual data, and then separately to this, you would have another XML file, or whatever. I'm just using XML because we've been using XML so far. Certainly, you could use JSON. You can invent your own text file format. You can do whatever you want. XML is going to be perfectly fine over here. You could have a separate one, which is your locale file, and in there you have basically the map of all the tags, right? So it's in some other file. This is a completely different file, and you have something like for I don't know, something so like entry ID equals fern steel wall. Oh, it's nice the autocomplete there. And then you have something like name lang equals en, and then you have wall, and then you have another one, etc., etc., or some other structure. The alternative is something like lang equals name equals en, and then in here you have all the name, description, anyway, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different ways to structure it. We're not going to be doing it right now. Right now, we are just going to be sticking to one language, but it's something to consider for the future. So I'm going to have name, basic wall, and the rest of our data. So movement cost, which is 0, which is our code for impassable. We have width, 1, height. Now, some of this stuff, like the width and height, maybe we would prefer having it as a parameter over here, right? As up here, right? You could do that. There's not really a pro or con. I think that logically it makes sense for it just to have the object type ID as part of here, and then every other property of the object be listed this way. But there's a bunch of different ways to do it. And actually, the other thing we might want to do is distinguish between these properties, which are basically part of the class, versus, especially when we get to the door, we have these extra parameters. But I think what we're going to do is just like our save file, we're going to keep our structure here. And actually, that's one of the things we should consider potentially. Our saving of loading our furniture, what does that look like? So in our scripts furniture, I mean, we already have a read XML function in here. Read XML over here, right? And this is to read from a save file. But in a very real way, reading from our furniture prototype file, which is what we're writing now, is going to be kind of similar. Now, it's not exactly the same because one of the things we don't do when we save our world, we don't actually save all the data that belongs to our object because we assume that we are first and foremost a carbon copy of the prototype. And the only thing that changes, so the only thing that reads, are these params. So I don't think we're going to be using the same read XML. I think that is perfectly fine. Although we could, so assuming we have another function over here. Now, this is not part of the what's it called? iXML serializable code. But let's say we have read XML prototype. And the idea is that this thing is the thing that sets, name is equal to whatever from the XML file. But at the end of it, we could then call read XML read in the param tag. Assuming we structure this okay, we could use this rather than duplicating code, which is nice. Yeah, so down here we have, I think it's params, and then a bunch of param inside of that. For example, for the door, now this is not going to be the case here, but for door we would have param, and I think these are just name value pairs, right? Yeah. Name equals openness, and value equals, well, 0 in our default thing. So this is not for our wall, but rather it would be for door. Something like that, which has no movement cost and has this sort of valuation in there. So that, I think, would probably work. And actually, I guess it's not at the end of the file. It's if we hit the params tag, then we just feed it off to this thing. But of course, we're going to have to make sure that read XML only loads in parameters at that point. But I think we can probably do something like that. We're going to be okay. Hell, what I might want to do is actually take this whole function, duplicate it, read XML params, reader like this. Where's our right? I guess it's above this. No, don't we? There it is. Oh, there's no big params. Oh, it is just like this. And it's a series of these, which is okay. It's okay in the regular save file. No, we can work with this. Yeah, we can work with this just fine. As long as things get reset to the right place. Let's do something like this for now. We'll clean it up after this. Because one thing that's nice is if you can write your XML, I mean, right now, the naive way of reading our XML file is we assume this stuff is in a certain order. But really and truly in an XML file, there's nothing that says that we could do this and have it be invalid. I mean, we've still named it height. So it would be nice if we could write our reading code such that it is sort of uncaring or agnostic about the order of things in there, which we can do. We just have to keep in mind, and we'll have to keep that in mind for the parameters as well. Okay, so we'll figure that out as we go forward. Let's go back to defining our wall up here, because it's, you know, the easiest sort of thing. So then we'll have sort of, links to neighbors, probably. So this one is true. I don't know if that's how we define booleans here. We're going to have to see if we want it defined like that, or if we want like a 0 or 1 value. We'll see that. And it encloses rooms. And the other thing we can do is, for some of these things, we can assume a default value. Like maybe we don't have to specify width, height, and these values for most furniture. We can assume it's 1 by 1, and we can actually assume that it's false for both of these, unless, you know, and so this is the exception more than a rule, but let's go ahead and move forward there. We set the name as well. So what we don't do is we don't set up the job prototype at this point. We're going to have to figure that out, how we want to structure that elsewise. Now, for the production job, for the construction job, this probably doesn't have to be custom Lua code. Well, or does it? Job complete, furniture building. No, because this is the assumption. So really we just have to, if we did something like, you know, building job, and then we have a list of inventory requirements. which has a object type. So for this, we would have steel plate, and an amount, which is 5. And we can even have like a deconstruct job. Like if you deconstruct this thing, what does it collapse into? Deconstruct job. And we can copy the same thing, but when you deconstruct it, you don't get all your materials back, so you only get, say, 3 steel plates on the ground when you deconstruct this thing. Wouldn't surprise me if we end up changing this going forward, but, you know, it's got a vibe. This sort of thing. So, I mean, that's really the definition of a wall. A door is almost exactly the same thing. I guess we can grab these two over here. Now, it does not link to a neighbor. And again, I would like this to sort of default. It doesn't have to be in there. Now, do we already have that in the furniture? In our furniture class, let's take a look here. Links to neighbor. It's a Boolean. We don't explicitly set it, but it should default to false. If we just instantiate a piece of furniture, it should default to false. And in our constructor over here, all right, I need my, where's my view pads document outline? Furniture, bool. Let me bring this up to the front. Yeah, see, we let you instantiate this without specifying that, and it'll assume it is false. So really, we can just leave this out because it's going to be the default. Now, that might be good, that might be bad, it might be confusing. Maybe we want to be explicit. Why? What? That was weird. Maybe we want to be explicit. I guess we can leave it in there for now. That's going to be okay. Same thing with the movement cost. Most things will probably have a movement cost of 1, which is to say normal. But there we go. So, and then it's got some parameters, including openness over here. And that is most of the door definition. Although, I might want to start saying, hey, let's add requirements for building doors. Right now, we could build them for free. And it's been fun for debugging. But let's go and change this up now. Now you still need a little bit of metal to make a door. Boom, done. And that's going to be as easy as it is to make changes. In fact, for users to mod our game as well, is they can just make changes to this furniture.xml file and ship it. The other thing we might want to do is have a sort of override system, right? Where you have this, our basic furniture.xml file, which we read in, but then if we find another furniture.xml file in like a mod subfolder, we read that in as well and allow it to, well, potentially add new pieces of furniture. But if a piece of furniture was already in the database, allow people to make changes that override in some way. So they could just say change the cost of building things instead of whatever else. But okay, that's going to be, I think that's fine. I'm not going to go and do all of our furniture prototypes right now because I want to make sure that this baseline version is okay. Right? Right. Our door did have a few other parameters here, which is opening. And again, I think we have it set up that if we didn't have the parameters in here and we were trying to read from somewhere else, it would just return 0. It would not throw an error to say that this parameter doesn't exist. But let's go ahead and, you know, make it a little explicit in here so we can keep track of things. And, oh, there's is enterable. Oh, that's a function response as well. So let's go. What we're going to do for testing is this create furniture prototypes. This whole thing is going to get commented out. This is our old one. And I'm going to make a new one. From which we're going to instantiate our 2 databases. And then we are going to read furniture prototype XML file here. And after which, what we're going to do, oh, it's just the formatting. It is actually commented out, but I think because of this comment here, it stops being gray, but this should still be commented out, so I think we're okay. And then after it does that, what we're going to do is we're going to re-implement the door logic behavior, which is these two. Because this bit will come from parsing a Lua file later. But for now, we still need to implement furniture behavior directly in C# code. So we've got that. So we're going to read the furniture prototype, which right now only contains the wall and door code, which is fine. So we're not going to be able to build our other furniture until we've confirmed that this is working. But we're going to get started on that. And in theory, there you go. It's a bunch of script recompiling. We're going to get no syntax errors right whatsoever. However, if we start playing at this point, we will definitely get an error, because our very first error, wow, we're getting a lot. I was going to say, our very first error is actually going to be here, because we're going to be trying to register update actions on furniture that doesn't exist yet. And then there's probably lots of other things going on as well. The job sprite controller? Oh, that's because create furniture prototype gets called at some point during our world setup. This gets called. This throws an exception, which stops the execution of the rest of the world setup, which means a bunch of things don't get completed. I suppose if I went and just commented this out for now, we might be able to start without a syntax, or without any real errors, and we do. And we could still build floor, which is great, but notice my furniture menu is empty because we don't have any in there. And if I did click the pathfinding test button, then we definitely get an error because it's trying to add walls to our scene, which is a type of object that doesn't exist, and that's exactly what happens. But other than that, yeah, our game is still running fine, except we literally have 0 furniture in here because the create furniture prototypes function is commented out. And we're going to have to read in the XML over here, which is going to be what we do next time. Thank you very much for watching, folks, and I'll see you then. Thank you everyone who pledged on Patreon to support these videos back in May, and are therefore keeping this series going from June through to early July. And a special thank to these Mike Check level supporters. We got Speedy Savant, Valiant Cake Fiend, Aaron Toibson, Marius Field Vold, Jan Torrevel, Julien Auger Lafont, Steven Stager, Michael McClintock, Kale the Quick, Drazion, Adjective, Jason Yanity, Wes Oldenboving, Craig Mortel, Neil Bulkley, Milner, and absolutely everyone who watched, shared, favorited, and subscribed these videos. Thank you very much for keeping this series going, and I'll see you next time.